Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. A third space is a term that refers to a safe space for people to come together for respectful dialogue in a spirit of listening, sharing, and learning. In this podcast, we explore what it means to have third space conversations, and we try to model them. If you like what you hear in this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, share it, and of course, like it. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society. Now let's get to third space today.
Hey, Lamar, how's it going today?
It's going well. How about you, Tom?
Well, not too bad. Not too bad at all. Getting ready for the 4th of July here in the home of Francis Scott Key.
Really?
Yes, Frederick is the home of Francis Scott Key.
Was the home of Francis Scott Key.
Was. Yeah, and he's buried here.
Oh, is he? Okay,
yeah,
he
could still be here. I just, this is going to sound very unpatriotic, but I really don't like the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, wow.
I love America the Beautiful. I wish that was our national anthem.
Well, I like singing them both, but the Star Spangled Banner is a bit graphic, but, it is what it is.
It is what it is. I mean, like that's ever going to change. But I've been in some venues where people have actually played America the Beautiful or sung America the Beautiful instead of the national anthem.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's just a lovely piece of music. And
it is.
But yeah,
in fact, we had a family reunion last weekend, and one of our family members is has been a vocal teacher, music teacher for years, and he led the group in singing America the Beautiful.
Really?
It was really pretty cool.
Well, and you got singers in your family, both you and Carl.
There's a bunch of singers in that family.
There are a bunch of singers in that family.
I actually kind of just stood back and listened because it was pretty cool.
Yeah. My father used to say the only instrument I can play is the radio.
Well, go ahead.
Well, what are you doing? What are you doing for the holiday this week? And we should explain that we're recording this on July 3rd, the day before the 4th of July.
That's correct. Well, I'm doing what I almost always do on the 4th of July.
What's that?
Nothing. And it kind of depends on when the 4th of July lands, right? This year it's on a Friday. But it's. I think we've talked about this before. I've got some of my own issues just with noises and sounds, and so I'm not a big fan of being around crowds with things that are exploding.
Right? I hear you with that. So, but I also know that you used to celebrate the 4th of July. You did that at Morning Sun a few times.
Morning Sun, Iowa has one of the best fireworks show that I think I've ever been to. And we used to go regularly. And you grew up in that town.
I did.
And I mean, it was a celebration that cotton candy, music, live entertainment, barbecue. It was just a huge picnic, and the line to get there and the line to leave on a county road in Iowa. There, you saw all these headlights and taillights, for miles as people came and tried to find a place to park.
And I actually never did that because I lived just 4 blocks from.
You could walk. Right. Well, some of us had to drive. And,
I'm sorry.
And some of us, if I recall, some of us didn't have room for everyone who wanted to leave the event.
Yeah.
I might have asked you to take home a certain person.
Yes, you did.
That was kind of cramping my style on my date that night.
Yeah. Thank you, Lamar.
You bet.
Yeah,
thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And I believe that is that when you had your Plymouth Duster?
No, I think it was the '68 Plymouth Satellite.
Oh, okay.
All right. I think so. At that, my mother had a Duster. She loved that Duster.
Okay.
And that wasn't until it was about that time. I had gotten the Satellite by that time. That was my car. and she replaced it with a Plymouth Duster, and I was like, "What were you thinking?"
Yeah.
You know what?
I didn't know you had a satellite. I had a satellite as well.
Yeah.
Right after I got married, it's a great car. I love that car.
They were a great car. I actually, before my mom took the Duster, Dalzell Brothers Motors in Southeast Iowa there. They were from Morning Sun as well, and but they had these dealerships all over Southeast Iowa for a time. And I went to Mount Pleasant to pick up a car they wanted my mom to test drive, and it was a Sebring, satellite Sebring.
Oh, yeah,
muscle car, right?
Yeah.
And I go, oh, I love this car. This is great. my mother walked out, looked at it, and said, "Take it back."
Yeah, my dad did that on a few cars too. Said, "Nope, this is not one for you."
At least I got to drive it 20 miles each way. It was pretty okay. It was
so Tom. What,
yeah,
I really, we're not doing anything on 4th of July. There are plenty of fireworks going off in our neighborhood. So we'll sit back and we'll kind of watch the neighbors. What are you doing on the 4th?
What am I doing on the 4th? Well, it's so I very much like the fireworks if they're convenient. And I was really, really spoiled growing up in Morning Sun, where I could literally walk, like 4 blocks and be where they were shooting off the fireworks and everything. I was very spoiled in that regard. And so I don't like to make a lot of effort to go see fireworks. As fate would have it, right behind our house, about 2 miles, is a little town, the little town of Walkersville, Maryland. And their fire department has a carnival and all kinds of stuff going on this week, and it culminates tomorrow or on Saturday. But they do their fireworks on the 3rd. So
at
tonight,
the fire station.
At the fire station.
What a great idea.
It seems like a great idea, doesn't it? And so we're going to go out on the back deck, and we're just going to sit there and watch the fireworks. Yeah, we'll be far enough away. We don't have to worry about the explosions. Oh, I was going to tell you, speaking of weird explosions. So I was playing in a golf event earlier this week in Pasadena, Maryland. And we got around to this hole, and all of a sudden I heard gunfire. And, every time I'm swinging, and finally I turned to the guy I was playing with. I said, "What in the world's going on?" And he says, "Oh, there's a shooting range right over this." I don't know what they were shooting. And it was a private gun club,
Okay.
So I don't know what they were shooting, but it didn't sound like 22 rifles.
Big booms.
Big booms. And usually right in the middle of my backswing. So I had a couple holes that were pretty awful because it just, I just was I'd get in the backswing and I'd wait for the boom.
So with where we're at recording today and the 4th of July being celebrated tomorrow, it begs us to talk today about what is patriotism.
Yeah. And absolutely.
You have connected us, and we had an interview with Guy and Heidi Burgess from Colorado. Yeah, and they have they put out a newsletter, a very thoughtful newsletter. We learn 2 to 3 times a week, and most recently they have not let us down. They have come up with a newsletter titled, let me get to the top of the page, but titled the 4th of July, a time to celebrate or not. Yeah. Interesting article.
Very interesting. I thought what was fascinating is that they used ChatGPT 4.0, I think it was, or 4.0, to they fed 2 prompts into it. Can you tell us what progressives think about celebrating the 4th of July? And then what can you tell us about how conservatives think about celebrating the 4th of July? It was really interesting to see what their responses were. And I did the same thing, but using Perplexity AI, and got very similar kinds of responses. And it's a worthwhile read. The link is going to be in the show notes, and I hope our listeners will take a time to listen to it. But that's one of those things that we felt like, okay, this is this kind of feeds nicely into our topic about what does it mean today to be patriotic?
Right.
And
yeah.
Yeah.
So we do encourage people to read it, and there was a couple of things that that I thought was very interesting. Just to highlight, one is, and they said this in the interview, and we have talked about this off and on, but they said, given that it's either an us or them way in which the U.S. politics is now being framed, it is not surprising that long-standing hardball tactics have now escalated to the point of where they are shaking democracy's foundation. So I thought that was, of the whole article, to me, a point that was extremely important. And then I was thinking, okay, so I get what you're saying about how different perspectives feel about celebrating the 4th of July, but how are you going to wrap this thing up?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't disappoint. It just took me a little bit longer to find that in the article, but they eventually they said, we can work to build a power with democracy that really does live up to its ideals. And think about that statement.
Mm-hmm.
As we go along in our conversation today, whether what is patriotism, that we can work to build a power with democracy that really does live up to its ideals. That's kind of something I'm going to be chewing on for a while.
Yeah, I really appreciated them talking about power with and power over, and that's a really important concept when it comes to democracy, when it comes to working and collaboratively and inclusively with folks. We have to determine, are we going to be working with power over people, or are we going to be working in a way that is power with? And I think their point's well made by them that our best opportunity, our best chance here is the power with and working with people, even though we may not always see eye to eye on some things. What's
your thought about what patriotism means? And do you consider yourself patriotic?
I do, but not overtly. I'm not gonna wear an American flag pin. I'm not gonna probably display an American flag. And I think that really goes to just my personality, that I'm not really comfortable with displays of that nature. I don't even really wear that many printed T-shirts. I've got some that I like and I will wear, but except with the Iowa Hawkeye stuff, right? Okay,
I don't mind. Go there.
I don't mind wearing. I can wear the Iowa Hawkeye stuff, but that's really kind of it. And I do wear Frederick Flying Cows gear, and things like that.
We're going to put a picture up one of these days.
Oh yeah, okay. So, but I don't know why that is exactly, that I feel less inclined to a lot of really overt displays of patriotism. And I was really thinking about that. And I came up with kind of 3 things that to me means patriotism. One is to serve the community and the country in or out of uniform. Now, when we think of patriotism in the U.S., we tend to think of people in uniform, whether it is, the first is military, then we have police, first responders, firefighters, people like that. But I want to suggest, and we're always thanking folks for their service, right? And that's good and that's appropriate. But there's folks we should be thanking for their service and we don't. For example, teachers, social workers, certified nursing assistants. These are all professions in which you make a conscious choice to step away from the opportunities of wealth in order to serve your community and your nation. And I think that we have some ways to go to recognize that when people make those kinds of decisions, that is also in service to the country and service to the community. A second thing for me is the willingness to serve, whether called or not. Now, I attempted when I was 18 years old and had to sign up for the draft. This was near the end of the Vietnam War. By that time, I had decided that I would register as a conscientious objector. I was told that I would not be allowed to in where I grew up, that everybody pretty much would be 1A. But even signing up as a CO, a conscientious objector, I was willing to do alternative service, whether that was in the military or outside the military. My issue was that I did not know that I could pull the trigger on a gun to take another human life. And I've always felt that if I couldn't do that, then I'm a danger to the rest of my team. If I couldn't, in clear conscience, pull the trigger when I needed to pull the trigger, I was not going to be any good to myself, and I was going to put the lives of my team in danger as well. And I didn't feel I could ever get to the point where I could do that. And so I was willing to do whatever alternative service came my way. And I think that is a part of being patriotic, is that it's not I know I'm not going to serve if I'm called, but rather, how might I be of service beyond asking me to do something that I find personally and morally extremely difficult to do. And then the last thing is I think for me, patriotism means that we give credit where credit is due to our country. And the United States has done some amazing and remarkable things in our history. But we've also done some terrible things in our history. And I think that what it means to be patriotic is to give that credit where credit is due, and then to offer a critique when it is needed. Guy and Heidi actually had this statement that was generated by ChatGPT that really caught my attention. Part of it said, patriotism isn't blind loyalty. It's the courage to demand better.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that. And I think that really sums that up very nicely for me. So those are the three things that just kind of popped for me, Lamar. We've been thinking about this for about a week or so now, right?
Yeah, right.
Between our last meeting and this podcast. And those are the three things that really just kind of popped for me. So what about you?
Okay. Well, we talk a lot about how we grew up because that's how we become who we are.
Yes.
And I think my experience growing up on a farm in Iowa was, putting a flagpole out in our yard and putting a flag up on the farm was a lot of expense and was not a necessary expense. However, that didn't mean that we didn't appreciate the country and that we didn't have pride in our country. So I think about what it means to be patriotic and where I agree with maybe some basic definitions and where I don't. One is when someone says, well, love your country and take pride in your country. I'm with you. There are things that I can really get behind that we have as a country that we do and that we've done. But as many other countries, to get where we're at, we have marginalized people. We've taken advantage of people. We have enslaved people. There's a lot of things as a country we have supported and done, and that in many ways we have tried to address very poorly in some cases. Last week, a friend and I took a 2-day trip to Western Kansas, and what we were doing, we were looking for sites where during the American Indian Wars, where things had taken place. And we found those sites. I mean, we found, where the Cheyenne who were enslaved in. I'm using the term enslaved very intentionally. In Oklahoma, were rushing, leaving, running away. 67, I think, men, women, and children were snuck away from the reservation in Oklahoma to go back to their home in North Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana, where they were from, because that's where they lived. That was their home. That's what they knew. But were pursued by the cavalry, and in western Kansas there was a spot where a battle took place between the cavalry and the Cheyenne, and also many have heard of the Sand Creek Massacre in western Colorado, and those individuals ended up in northwestern Kansas at a site. We went to that site to try to visually and maybe emotionally connect with what was happening there. When we look at our history, those kinds of decisions that our country made, I can't get behind. The sense of oppressing other people, and taking what wasn't ours to take, and those kinds of things. It doesn't mean that I have a great answer for how we would have handled things, but when I look at how we've oppressed people, I'm not proud of that, and that's painful. When I look at it. So that's a couple of examples of kind of when I think maybe you were talking about, that there are things that I'm not proud about, but then there are many things that I am pleased with, and that I do get behind. I don't use the word love because I think love is probably not a very good word to describe patriotism as far as loving a country, but I think that there are things that I am grateful for. But beyond those events and terrible atrocities that people have had to endure, there are ideals that I think I want to embrace, that I think are important ideals, things that we believe are we say we believe are important for us: equality, liberty, justice, things that we do with, whether it's through our court systems or how we treat each other, are important parts of who we are as a country, and the ideals that we try to live up to. So, as I think that being a patriot is also holding into account ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When we're not living up to those ideals, when we have made the mistakes or we've treated people poorly or wrongly, that we're willing to challenge ourselves, saying this is not okay. We can do better than this. To me, that's also being a patriot.
Yeah.
But I think that in the article that Guy and Heidi put out there, this either you're with me or you're against me mentality doesn't give room for us to challenge ourselves to be better.
And that mentality can exist on either extreme, and I've experienced it on both extremes, and I find it who says that I can't pick and choose some things to that are important to me, that are part of the conservative mindset? Who says I can't pick and choose some things that are part of the progressive mindset that are meaningful to me? But when I'm with those folks that basically say it's all or nothing, that's when I lose my patience pretty quickly. And it's like, well, okay, if you're saying it's all or nothing, then guess what? It's probably going to be nothing. Well, except that's what I want, So you're not going to like my response to that. Tom here. Getting to third space is always free. We love doing this, and it is a labor of love we hope makes the world a better place. We don't ask you for money, but we do ask you to help us grow our audience. Hit the like button, share the podcast, and subscribe yourself. All of these will help us grow. Thanks.
I don't know how do you handle that when you are in those conversations? Do you actually say it's nothing, or do you just excuse yourself from the conversation?
No, what I try to do in that is I will be honest and say I don't know that I can go that far, but here's where I can agree, and try to keep the conversation going. And what I find is that most often people will oh, well, that's an interesting perspective, and it doesn't cut off conversation. I mean, to walk out of the room and say, well, if I walk out of the room, I'm doing the same thing as them.
That's right. That's right.
I'm saying it's all or nothing. Either you agree with my perspective or I'm out of here. And no. I try very hard not to do it. I'm not saying I haven't done that. I'm just saying
we're not perfect, right?
Right. I'm just saying that I try very hard not to do that, but to find that point at which, I can have some agreement with them. So,
you brought up the flag thing, and we started out by talking about the national anthem a little bit. Years ago, when I was in a different city, there was a real push for what I would consider ultra-patriotism. There was a push, and I'll be honest with you, I can't remember where it came from, but the push was everyone needs to put a flag out. Everyone needs to get a flag. Our city paper printed a double page the double page on the middle of a flag that you could then take out of the paper and put in your windows. It was the most god-awful looking thing. It wasn't it was supposed to be red, white, and blue, but it was like variations of that depending on the printing press. But they were all over. And you know what newspaper does in the sun?
Yeah.
And so
fades.
Within just a few days, you had all these faded looking things. And I'm sitting there, and I didn't do it. I mean, I refused to do it because I thought it was ugly. It did not really define who I was as a patriot and as an American, as a person. And it was almost saying, well, it wasn't just almost, it was very clearly saying, you do this if you're a patriot. You don't do this if you're not patriotic, you're not going to do this.
Yeah, it was like a line in the sand, wasn't it?
A line in the sand. That's right.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about me at all, when you give me an ultimatum, I'm usually stepping on the side that is a little bit contentious.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was just one of those memories. I thought, this is awful. Not only that, but it's when I was young, I was also in Scouts.
Yeah, I was too.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't make it probably as far as you did, but
well, I didn't make it all that. I think I made it to second class, and that was pretty much it. I've always been a second class kind of guy.
I will tell you that one of the things that was drilled into us was respect.
Yes, absolutely.
And there were rules that we had to follow, from displaying a flag, from folding a flag, storing a flag.
Right. That's right.
Destroying a flag that has outlived its lifetime. All those kinds of things were very important things for us. And then when I see someone else's image on a flag right now,
yeah.
And I'll just be honest, when I see the Trump flags with the American flag and then Trump face on it, it just turns my stomach. The other day, I will be honest with you, in the Fever game, there was a flag with Caitlin Clark's picture on it. And I go, you know what? As much as I love watching Caitlin Clark, that bothered me.
Yes. I think I saw that same thing. And I thought, ooh, I don't like that. Yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just a side note, but that's kind of how I feel about some of that.
Yeah. Well, as a Quaker, it's a little hard for me to say too much about the flag because Betsy Ross was a Quaker. And
I forgot about that.
The seamstress who created the first American flag. However, she was what is known as a free Quaker. which meant that she was not a pacifist.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how she got involved with making a flag for the country and for the soldiers. So,
well, what do you think, Tom, about the idea that patriotism also gives us the freedom to demand that we do better?
I'm not sure I quite understand that question.
I think that the difference here, maybe it's about blind loyalty versus a critical assessment of the country that I identify with. If I believe that my country can do no wrong, or that I'm behind everything that my country is doing, to me that's blind loyalty.
Yes.
But I think I think a patriotic response, my perspective is a patriotic response means that I'm not only quiet, but that I do demand, in whatever way I find works, that we do better than what we're doing.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think that when blind loyalty leads to this idea, well, now we're going to go down a slightly different path.
Okay.
Blind loyalty then leads us into this idea of American exceptionalism, which in turn leads to a sense of entitlement. I think Americans are. I don't think America is all that exceptional. I think that we are very good. When we're good, we're really good. When we're bad, we can be really bad. And I think and I think it's okay to say that. Blind loyalty tends to lead us into this idea that the philosophy of American exceptionalism, it leads us into a philosophy of entitlement. And I think part of what informs my idea of patriotism is that in my life, I've had enough opportunity to travel internationally that I have seen really ugly Americans when they travel. I mean, ugly. You know, I got pulled out of a line going into Canada and sent into the back room of immigration when I was doing some work up there. And as it turns out, it was because I identified myself as a consultant and not as a teacher, when really I was up there in a teaching role or training role. They thought I was an oil consultant.
Oh.
And they weren't too keen on oil consultants. So I have to go back to this back line. And the image of the Canadians is very friendly. They're happy blue uniforms. Hey, welcome to Canada. Well, in the back room, they're all wearing black and they're all carrying guns. Okay.
Oh. Okay.
It was really intimidating. But there was a man in the line there. And he started saying, "I'm an American. Why do you have me back here? You need to let me out of here." He started, this whole thing. And he started yelling it. He was a businessman. And I thought, it's not going to go well for you in here, guy. And it didn't. He disappeared and didn't see him again because he went to a back room. I just went up to a guy in the counter, and he says, "So what are you doing here?" I said, "I'm leading a workshop in Saskatoon." And he says, "Oh, you're a teacher?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You're not a consultant?" I said, "Well, I am a consultant in the States, but I don't do that up here." And he says, "Oh, okay. Damn, welcome to Canada." And I'm out the door.
Words do matter, right?
Words matter. And he, I don't know where this other guy went. I never saw him again. I would assume he's okay, but because at heart, Canadians are nice folks. But, I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed by that guy. But he's not the only one I've seen do that kind of thing. And I think that is the blind loyalty leading to a sense of exceptionalism, leading to a sense of entitlement. I don't see that as patriotic. I see that as arrogant.
Okay. Oh, I can be there with you. I get that. And I think that what you're talking about also is the responsibility we have to represent the country that we're from. We don't often think about that. But I go back to some of the lessons that I learned growing up, not just from my parents, but from my teachers and from my coaches and from those other people that I, were in leadership roles, is that I'm always representing something, whether it was my high school or whether it was my college or whether I'm always representing something. And that's an interesting thought, that if you're traveling internationally, do you take seriously the fact that you're representing the country that you say that you are a patriot to?
That's right. And you realize that people's experience with you may be the only American they know.
Well, that's true.
And they're going to make a judgment on that, about who you are. And then you contrast that with some of the stories that came out of World War II of American soldiers that liberated towns and gave the children the chocolate that they had and things of that nature. I mean, that's the kind of image that is very powerful, that really stays in people's memories, if they personally experience that. But it's also true that if the only American you've ever met was a total jerk, that stays with you too.
It does. So let me ask you this question, Tom. Knowing kind of how you define yourself as a patriot, and those that you have interacted with who would call themselves patriots as well, do you find that you differ much in practice, or do you think that you blend in pretty well if you were to go to the 4th of July celebration, or to meetings, etc.? Do you feel that there are a lot of Americans who are similar to your definition of patriotism?
I think honestly, I think I represent the great middle. I think that, I'm not going to be the guy that is running around in the Uncle Sam outfit, on the 4th of July, that kind of thing. And I think I probably represent the great middle. I want to go back to something for just a second, and that is that growing up in Iowa on a farm, my dad had brothers, and they were all older than him, and all of them went to the military in World War II. But Dad did not. And the reason he did not is because he was the youngest son, and he had a responsibility to the farm. But I always had a sense, because there were so many people in Morning Sun that served in the military. There was my Boy Scout leader was a man who spent time in one of the worst German stalags, the prisoner of war camps in Germany. And we had other people that were in various branches. A lot of people served in World War II out of Iowa. But my dad could not, was not allowed to. And I think that he carried that as a kind of shame. I can't really point to anything specific on that, but I think that he always felt embarrassed because he wasn't allowed to serve, especially when his brothers did. And I had cousins that served in Vietnam, and so there's a military history in my family. But I think that the experience I had growing up with my dad, and the fact that he felt this kind of embarrassment, there wasn't a lot of the celebration of 4th of July other than going down and getting a really good barbecue sandwich and watching the fireworks, but not a lot of other shows of patriotism in our house, because I think he felt like he didn't earn it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I can understand that. He wasn't
entitled to it because he didn't serve.
That's an interesting perspective. And carrying that kind of feeling, it's got to be difficult. But yet, the country was also pretty responsive to the needs of like the family farm, of the bread, the wage earners, maybe the wrong way to say that, but the person who is responsible to manage that farm. Lamar here. I know that this podcast is going a little long today, but hang in there with us. It's going to be worth it. If you need to take a break, go ahead. And while on the break, be sure to take a moment and hit the like button. Go ahead and subscribe. Share this podcast with somebody, and even send us a comment. You can send me an email at lamarthirdspace@gmail.com. Now remember, that's Lamar, the number 3, RD. Now back to the podcast. And my experience was a little different than that. I had an uncle who served in the Korean War, and then my brothers who were older than me, did serve as conscientious objectors, but did 2-year voluntary service in hospitals. And my father, who also went to get his physical back in the day, had vision troubles and had been blind for a period of time and could not pass the physical test. And so he stayed home to farm. So, I have kind of a mixture in my family, my experience of those who chose not to go to the war front, but chose to voluntarily serve 2 or more years in service. So I get patriotism. I think it is an important thing to understand and to value. Here's what has been bothering me lately. What I feel is intentional trying to erase the memory and the history of maybe the things that we want to do better with, or that we didn't do so well. And I'm shifting here a little bit because I think that this is important, at least point to bring up, is there seems to be a concerted effort to say, we're not going to teach, we're going to erase from our history books kind of the things that we did to get where we're at now, that took advantage of people, marginalized people, hurt people, and we're not going to live up to that, because those things live on in other people's lives.
Yeah. So you're talking about the erasure that is taking place, or the revision of our history.
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so as a patriot, I feel it's necessary to say that's not okay. We can live with the things that are not great about our country, because I go back to this do better idea, but we can live with that if we understand it and say that's not going to be who we are. However, I'm just concerned if we start erasing some of those things that we are saying were not so great, that we may do them again, or some form of them again.
Well, yeah, I think that's a very realistic fear. That if we intentionally put that aside and say, no, that really didn't happen like that, then we're opening ourselves up. Let me add one other little dimension to that. I think that when people rewrite history to make us look stronger, make us look bigger, it's actually a sign of weakness. Strong people, strong countries are able to take the good and the bad and to balance those, and to admit to the bad and celebrate the good and learn from the bad and do better in the future. I mean, that's true for human beings as well. I mean, if a person walks around and they deny the bad that they have done throughout their life, no, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. That wasn't me. That wasn't me. We would call that person psychologically not particularly healthy, right?
That's right. That's right.
And but as a country, we're sitting here on the cusp of trying to revise our history. To me, that shows just how weak we are as a country. not how strong we are. And I would like to see that reversed. I mean, there were some shameful things that happened. So I mentioned my dad, and you're from Iowa, I'm from Iowa. We are both of German extract. 63% of the people in the state of Iowa are still descended from Germans. What people don't realize and remember is that in World War I and possibly even World War II, Germans were also ostracized because of their Germanic history and the fact that Hitler and the Kaiser were engaging in these wars. In fact, in some places in Iowa, swastikas were painted on farmers' barns.
Right.
Because they had these German-sounding names. And, well, find a farmer in Iowa that doesn't have a German-sounding name. You throw a rock, you hit one, right? So, that's not a proud part of our history any more than it's proud that we're of what we're doing today with people. And don't get me going on alligator Alcatraz.
Oh
my God. We are giving our children so much to be ashamed of. That's all I'm going to say about that.
I said, well, this is an interesting perspective, though, that we are creating a history that our children will say, hey, we are better than this. Yeah, we can do better than this. Yeah. I hadn't quite thought about it in those terms. That's interesting. But yeah. So where does this take us?
Where does this take us? Well, it takes me to my deck tonight to enjoy the fireworks, and it takes me to a deeper understanding of what it really means to be a patriot to me. I think you started by asking, do I see myself as a patriot? The answer is yes. Would everybody else see me as a patriot? No. But you know what? That is their problem. It's not mine. I'm not going to judge their patriotism any more than they should be judging mine, because I know who I have been. I know what my life has been. I know what I have done for our country. And if they've done similarly good things, wonderful. But if you're going to stick a flag in your truck or on your house and wear red, white, and blue and do all this kind of stuff and then stand there and judge me because I'm not doing that, I have a suggestion for you. Truly, go get a life.
I think I would answer my own question saying I feel like I'm very much a patriot. I think I would say that that there are people who may question that because of some of my affiliations. But I think that I think the fact we're doing a podcast, I think the fact that you volunteered in the voting process, I think that talking about what we feel are important values that we should be espousing and owning up to the failures that we've had and not repeating those kinds. To me, those are foundational patriotic principles. I think that those who, even as they were putting together our articles and our declarations to define who we are as a country, they struggled with many of those kinds of questions and those kinds of challenges of how do we become better? How do we become different from what we were? How do we become different from where we came from across the ocean, and do something different? So to me, it's they call this the Great Experiment, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And coming from a research-based background, experiments sometimes they don't necessarily fail, because what you do is you learn something, you readjust, you tweak the variables, and you go back at it again. And that's what we need to be doing. I believe that it's a great experiment. And where we find that the variables that we put into place are not working to get us to our goal,
mm-hmm.
Let's back up. We handle it at the voting box. We handle it by pressure on our elected officials. We deal with things by how vocal we are. we're allowed in this country to do civil discourse, not only civil discourse,
civil disobedience.
Civil disobedience. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. All of those things are tools that we have to show our patriotism.
That's right.
And I want to encourage us to use those tools, the ones we're comfortable with, the ones we're uncomfortable with, what we do well, and be effective as part of this great experiment.
You know, both of us, Lamar, have had careers. Certainly in the early days, we spent many years working in professions that didn't pay us a lot. We could have had other jobs. You know, I mean, near the ends of our careers, you know, I was in business for myself. I did a little bit better. You worked for a company where you did a little bit better. But prior to that, we spent many, many years working in organizations that were serving the greater good of the communities through education, through counseling, through all kinds of things, through human services. I just want to say thank you for your service. And I bet
thank you, Tom.
Very few people have thanked you for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And likewise to you, because I know what you've been through as well.
Well, thank you. Well, hey, I think it would be really, really fun to hear from people, to tell us, what did you do on the 4th of July? And in what ways do you think of yourself as a patriot? How do you think about yourself as a patriot? Yeah. I hope people will respond to that. I think it would be wonderful we've been very honest about this. And there are some people gonna say, well, it doesn't sound very patriotic to me. And for other people, it's gonna sound too patriotic. But
I don't care. But yeah, no, you're right. It would be interesting to kind of have some people wrestle with the same things you and I wrestled with today, and kind of give us some feedback on how do they feel about their own patriotism.
Yeah. Well, hey, enjoy your quiet day tomorrow.
I will.
We're going to do a quiet 4th, but tonight is going to be fireworks.
It's not going to be quiet. It's not going to be quiet. I'm still in a neighborhood where there's a lot of booming going on, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm where I need to be. So
excellent.
All right.
Very good. All right. Hey, good to see you. Catch you
again
soon.
Tom. All right. Take care, man.
Bye. Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to get notices about new episodes, and be sure to like and share the podcast as well. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus, and we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today, so you can check them out yourself. Until next time, keep moving forward toward third space. We don't know diddly squat, but we do have opinions.